And this is the most interesting thing about the Bears. And regardless whether it's the first or the second round pick, and let's not listen, there is a pathway to the Bears getting the number one overall selection, assuming, unfortunately, that they don't win out, they lose out, or whatever. The Houston Texans, if they win 2 games and they end up with 3 wins like the Bears, because they have that tie, they would actually move below the Chicago Bears. But the greatest thing about the Bears, and it reminds me of the 49ers a couple of years ago, is that even though, let's say the Bears end up with the number 2 pick, whatever it is very similar to the 49ers when they took Nick Bosa, in the fact that regardless of what is happening this season, and I know a lot of people will look back on this year and be like, see, we told you the Bears were going to win just 3 games. It's funny because the Bears don't feel like a 3-win team, if that makes sense to you. Because a lot of times when you see these teams that win 3 games, 4 games, even 5 games, like look at the Atlanta Falcons, look at the Carolina Panthers, and look at the Chicago Bears. Which situation would you rather be in right now? Would you rather be the Bears with Justin Fields being like, okay, we might have the worst record, but we're probably the best positioned to make a long run in the near future? And that is the thing about this pick. It's like, it is going to be so amazing, whether they keep it or not. Even if they decided, you know what, we'll just keep the number 2 overall selection, or even if it's the first, although it would be foolish because teams are going to want to move up and get a quarterback. The Bears are setting themselves up, and there's so much enthusiasm. There is so much reason to be excited about this team moving forward that regardless of where they finish, this does not feel like a 3-win team. I have lived through 3-win teams. This does not feel like that. There's no reason to be morose. There's no reason to be upset. The Bears should be excited. And the draft pick is just going to be extra cabbage. It is going to be a side salad that we didn't order, and we're just happy to take it. It's like when you're at a pizza place. They're like, hey, somebody ordered this pie and never showed up. Why don't you go ahead and take it? That's exactly what it's like, and it's exactly why we're excited about the future of the Chicago Bears. And you know what? I've been talking way too long, Sammy. Let's go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy and AirPura. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Tuesday night. You know what that means. It is time for Take It to the Rank. Carmen Vitali will be joining us here in a moment. The voice that you hear on the intro is Jeff Joniak. Just want to let everybody know this Thursday I will be on with Jeff and Tom with Bears Radio. We're going to be recording that early Thursday morning. So excited to be joining them once again to talk about the Chicago Bears and everything that's happening this season and what we have to look forward to in the future. So let's go ahead right now and bring on Carmen Vitali, who is kind enough to join us. The young lady who had to rip up her story on Saturday. Are you at what point during that game were you like, oh my God, the Vikings are going to win this?
Yeah, no, it was funny because like the way that these things kind of come about is during every game I'm slacking back and forth with my editors, coming up with the angles. You know, they're telling me what they see, I'm telling them what I see, all that other stuff. And so going into halftime, my editor was like, this is great. You can probably pre-write the story mostly at halftime and then just put in some quotes after the game is over and we'll be, you know, it'll be a pretty little bow and you can get on with your Saturday. And then, I mean, it really wasn't until like the beginning of the fourth quarter where I was like, oh God, because even my editor was like, no, he's like, you're okay. They would have to go, Kirk Cousins would have to go full Tom Brady and the Colts would have to go full Atlanta Falcons for this thing to actually like turn around. And he's like, you're good. It's not going to happen. And I'm like, are we sure? And then by the time the fourth quarter, I'm like, I know you said I was okay. I don't think I'm okay anymore. Or so I just like, I tried to salvage a couple of paragraphs And I ended up rewriting the entire thing. But I mean, I have to say that was probably the most excited I've been during a game in a long time because I was like screaming at the TV, which is hysterical because that's not usually my style at all. I'm very stoic. All my years in press boxes have conditioned me to kind of just like sit there and take it all in. And, you know, like the hits on Justin Jefferson, all of the flags I was like, come on. Like, I'm supposed to be an ejected journalist here.
Yes. How dare you? You went full fangirl. Normally you're sitting there like Bud Grant, stoic as all get out, and then all of a sudden you turned into Mike Ditka screaming and yelling at the television. Yeah. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I called that at halftime. I tweeted it out even because I was so upset because Matt Ryan and Jeff Saturday, the whole point of having Jeff Saturday coach the Indianapolis Colts is that you can be fun and just do crazy things. And they kept settling for field goals. And I'm like, oh, this is one too many field goals. And with the 2-point conversion, I know it seems impossible because I think a lot of us still have our brains conditioned to the old 7-point scoring system. But you got to factor in the 8s, and it makes all the difference in the world. And you know what? I don't know. I want to sit here and make fun of I was making fun of the Vikings. I was throwing out my Kirk Cousins jokes. I had that already in playoff form. I said that the committee should just vote in the Lions over the Vikings. I was on a roll. I was having such a great time. And I'm like, these are going to come back to haunt me. But everybody else was in on it too. Everybody else was in on it too. And I'm like, what can you do? Like, I'll take the old takes exposed on this one. But it was an entertaining football game. And of course, on Sunday, the Chicago Bears played a very entertaining football game going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. And once again, you know, I know that I go on Total Access and I make a fool of myself picking the Bears to win, but I lay out a very detailed explanation why it's plausible the Chicago Bears can win. And then they hit all the check marks. They do what I say, but there's always one or two things missing. But ultimately, they did not win that game. What was your takeaway from Sunday with the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little apprehensive because I had gone into it being like, there's no way. Like, and I feel like anytime you feel so absolute about something, it just never ends up that way. But my whole argument, though, going into that game was like, yes, the Eagles don't have anything left to prove, but Jalen Hurts very much still does. And, you know, he's trying to make his case for the MVP race. I mean, I think he's already made it, but the fact of the matter is the more gaudy stats you can get, the better off you're going to be, especially if you're kind of like new to the MVP race. People aren't comfortable with you yet and haven't seen a larger body of work from what you've done. So I was like, he has every incentive to just come out here and dominate. And that's kind of what I expected him to do. But I mean, had it not been for like all of the injuries, there were so many injuries to the Bears. I mean, they were in that, and the defense was a huge part of that. The takeaways were, I mean, it was like Jalen Hurts had thrown 3 picks prior to that game, and then he threw 2 in that game. Like, that's awesome. And that was so encouraging. That's what I ended up writing my story about, was how encouraged you have to feel about this Bears defense now going forward, because you got the defensive-minded head coach too, and you've got some really good young core pieces that you can build around with, obviously, you know, some off-season additions that you're going to need to make in both free agency and the draft. But like, you have some guys that are there that you can build around, and they're young, and it's just a really good foundation. So that was my whole takeaway, was they showed me exactly what I needed to see to be encouraged. That came from Justin Fields as well. I think he said something really telling after the game in his press conference. We were sitting there, and we were like, it was kind of a joking back and forth with reporters and him, but he was like, I don't want to rush for 1,000 yards every season. That's not something I'm aspiring to. I don't want to be 1,000-yard rusher every year. I want to be a quarterback, and I want to throw the ball. And I'm like, great. But he's like, and then in the same breath, he was like, but now that I'm already here, I do want the rushing record.
Yeah,
and he was like breaking it down. Like, you know, he's 206 yards away from Lamar Jackson's rushing record. And he's like, so that works out to like 70 yards a game. He's like, yeah, I could probably manage that. But like, that's not what he's setting out to do. And I just think that's a really good approach. And I thought that was really telling. I just, you know, about the way this is going to go going forward. I mean, his main motivation for running is to not take hits, is to kind of control like more so like what happens to him and get himself out of danger, because I mean there was a lot of that given, especially in this really scary injury to Tevin Jenkins.
No, for sure. And so I think the only people outside of, Justin Fields admitting that he wants to get that record, of course, everybody who plays fantasy football wants him to get that record. And speaking of which, Underdog Fantasy is the easiest way to play fantasy sports. It's simple to get started. Just head to underdogfantasy.com or download the app. Sign up using the promo code SICK, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. So if you deposit $100, Underdog will give you $100. You deposit 25, Underdog will match that at 25. And of course, having the app on your phone is great whenever there's injuries. Of course, the Jalen Hurts injury news broke this week. I found out on the Underdog app, was like already panicking. Do I go pick up Gardner Minshew or things like that? And even if if you thought that fantasy was over, you could go sign up right now, play in a bunch of they have so many contests. It makes it so much fun. If you want to start getting in on this Justin Fields action, you could do that as well. I will say this too, as much as we love Justin Fields rushing, and of course he had the big run that was begat because of a breakdown on the offensive line. Alex Leatherwood got beat, but a lot of people get beat by number 7. So I'm not really super concerned about that, but I still feel that his passing gets better each and every week. And again, he's throwing to Dante Pettis. He's throwing to not Wheeler, who is Simba. Gosh, I can't even think of the guy's name, but he's throwing to these guys that nobody has ever heard of coming into this season. And I feel like he's making progress each and every week. What did you see out of him as a passer this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, again, a progression of, kind of waiting to see as much as he could, waiting to see what develops, scrambling for the sake of finding guys or buying guys more time. But I mean, yeah, he had virtually nothing to work with in that game. And so it was hard to kind of evaluate, just given the fact that, EQ goes out right away and you're already down Chase Claypool and N'Keal Harry. So going into the game, so it was kind of like okay, now who? So I think it was really hard to evaluate him as a passer, but still got Cole Kmet involved. David Montgomery was a little bit more involved in the, as in the passing game or the receiving game as the running back, as well as just muscling his way through quite a few tackles that game. It was a hard game to evaluate that, and that's not obviously Justin's fault. So I just I like what I see, though, with him kind of having the idea to scramble, not just to take off himself,
right,
but to buy himself time and continue to look downfield and see, if something comes open with the time that he's bought.
Yeah, whether Webster catches the ball or not, you're like, okay, did he get out of the pocket? Did he make the right read? That's fine. I mean, Dante Pettis drops. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. Like, that part of it is like just what is he seeing and how is he reacting to the plays? And I think for me, that's top notch. Now, you talk about some of the injuries. Tevin Jenkins had a neck injury. Do you have the latest on that by any chance?
All we really heard out of Matt Eberflus is that things are encouraging, and he was due to be released from the hospital after the game, like the day after the game. So yesterday, rather. So he's been really kind of tight-lipped from everything I've heard so far about Tevin. And maybe there was something said today that I might have missed. It was kind of chaotic for me because literally like all 3 head coaches between the Packers, the Vikings, and the Bears were like I was getting notifications that all of them were talking at the same time. Yeah. So I was trying to go back and forth. So I might have missed that. But that being said, I mean, after the game, that was one of the first things that was asked, and it's encouraging, which I take to mean, he had movement in his extremities and that he had gone to a hospital. But I mean, the scene just itself was so just harrowing, completely harrowing. You hate when you see stuff like that. I mean, Tevin Jenkins was like face down on the ground and did not move.
Yeah.
And I mean, he is so incredibly tough. And so it's just so concerning. Like, you saw the cart come out, and then like, even as the cart came out, I realized that they hadn't turned him over yet.
Yeah.
And then they bring the stretcher down, and I'm like, oh my God, like this I knew like right away that it had to have been like a neck injury, because that's the only reason that you don't move them right away. for fear of doing something further. But yeah, I mean, his entire teammates then like came off the bench, and you just never want to see that. So hopefully encouraging means that, I don't know that we'll see him again this season.
Yeah, he said, well, classic Eberflus. He's like, he's day to day. And it's like, Matt, like, we don't need to play this game. Like, we're 3-11. Yeah. Like, it's okay. We can go through this. We don't have to be evasive on every single thing. I appreciate it. I love that he's committed. I love that he's committed to the bit, so to speak. Like, it's very cool.
Even after the game, when he was just like, it's encouraging. Like, it took like a couple follow-up questions to find out that he went to a hospital. I'm like,
yeah,
please, like, we're all very concerned. Like, this is coming from a place of like legitimate concern for this man as a human. Like, is he okay? Is he paralyzed? Is there like, please just tell us. Like, you don't need to be mum. Like, being mum in those situations, I feel like makes it worse.
A little,
because then your imagination just starts like running wild. So it's like, okay, he was taken to a hospital. Signs are encouraging. Like, say he has movement in his extremities or something. Yeah. Like, just give us like some peace of mind here, because we all, like, at least for me, speaking for myself, like, I was legitimately really shaken by that and really, really concerned for the guy as a human being. And I don't think that, like, again, like, you don't need to play him the rest of the season, because like he's answered every single question you ever had about him. Like, that his natural position at the league level is right guard. He has been, like, since he switched to that position, he's been one of the highest graded at that position, throughout the season, and during stretches of the season was really, really playing at a really elite level. So, that's where you're going to play him. He's going to be your starter next year. Let the guy just recover, because neck injuries can end careers. It ended a friend of mine's career, after 12 years in the league as a center. The neck injury was what did him in eventually, after sustaining like 20-something surgeries.
Yeah, it is really one of the things that you don't want to play around with. So as he's continuing to be evasive, and it's fine. Like, I understand what he's doing, but at the same time, like, this is a little too serious. Like, just say that he's okay. We'll see him next year. It's fine. I don't want to be defeatist or anything like that, but this is why we have depth on the roster. And so hopefully he'll get healed up, and then next year he'll be ready to go. And we've got ourselves a great right guard. On the other side of the football, you touched on this earlier, talking about the defense looking so good. I want to touch on a number of things. We did see that Jack Sanborn went on the IR this week, but I think moving forward, and it's a similar type situation where it's a disappointing end to what is a very encouraging sign, and a guy that you can hope to pencil in as a starting linebacker next season. Are we convinced? Are we good with Sanborn? Are we looking at other spots when we're addressing free agency in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that, again, he came on really strong. He was solid, reliable, everything you need out of that Sam linebacker spot. He's not having to coordinate the defense or relay the calls on the defense. He doesn't have all of that much responsibility, just has to really worry about his job. And he can do that. So whether he can take on more responsibility, I think that's maybe the remaining question that you have. And if that Sam linebacker spot is the best place for him, I tend to think it is. But I mean, I don't think that there's any sort of really sense of urgency as to figure out where he belongs, because I think that you can go into this offseason knowing that you've got a reliable Sam linebacker, and maybe you need to look more at the Mike and the Will spots and figure out, Nicholas Morrow, I know, had kind of gone back and forth between that Mike and Will spot, moved to the Will spot, especially with Roquan gone. That was a unit that was going to need to be restructured anyway. And you knew that as soon as they got rid of Roquan. So, but I think that, you can like, Jack Sanborn is one of those guys that you feel pretty good about being a starter for next season. And there's not a ton of those guys on either side of the football for the Bears, but I think Sanborn is one of them. And he's such a great story too. And he is a high effort, high motor guy. I think he fits in with the staff really well too, because something that was told to me by their wide receivers coach was just the way in which they grade loafs is different, because they essentially, if you're not straining to make the play, if you're not going above and beyond to make the play, then if you're just like doing your job base level, getting to your spot and that's it, that's a loaf, is like just doing your job. Like they want to see you go above and beyond every single time. And that's exactly who Jack Sanborn is. So I think that they have to be, ecstatic with the value that they got.
100%. I mean, you think about the fact that they used their first 2 picks both in the second round on Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, and the fact that you get Jack Sanborn as an undrafted free agent is a huge coup for the front office staff. But let's talk about Kyler Gordon for a second. You mentioned the interception. Both of those interceptions came without getting pressure on the quarterback, which has been one of the reasons why I think the Bears haven't been able to create a lot of turnovers, is that they're not getting pressure on the quarterback. But I thought that Kyler Gordon made a lot of exceptional plays. He played very well. The unfortunate part is that they sent him in on a blitz. He hit the wrong gap. And of course, Jalen Hurts scores a touchdown. Jalen Hurts was dropping absolute dimes to A.J. Brown. And I hate watching the replays because it's like Kyler Gordon could not be any closer to the football. So I feel like, you know what? Like sometimes quarterbacks make great plays. It is what it is. I thought he played really well. What was your takeaway from Kyler Gordon?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of the plus side of playing that nickel spot is, it takes a while. And I think that that's what we saw in the beginning of the year, him getting adjusted from going outside to inside. But like as a nickel, you have to read, you have to know what everyone around you is doing. And then you have to read exactly what the offense is doing. And you have options usually on every single play. And so that takes a little bit of adjustment. It takes some experience. You want to see what these NFL offenses are giving you, all of that kind of stuff. And now we're seeing it pay dividends where he's making the right reads. And that's the testament to that is the fact that, there isn't pressure on the quarterback, but he's still making these plays because he is now being more anticipatory because he's seen what these guys, like what teams are trying to do at this level. And that's what's paying off right now. He's an incredibly smart player, and you have to be to play that position. I think that goes really overlooked is just how much more cerebral that position is from outside corner. And that's what's, going to be paying dividends. The fact that he's already past that learning curve, it's seemingly, and it's not even hit the end of his first season, is really, really encouraging and just tells you exactly, who these guys picked up and how justified they were in making those picks between him and Jaquan Brisker. I think that, the safety role is you're set back that much further. So it's a little bit easier to read. And that's why I think Jaquan had some more production earlier than maybe Kyler did. But I'm very impressed by him. There's really nothing you can do against A.J. Brown when he's in the slot. And then, Jalen Johnson talked about it too after the game. And I loved their Twitter exchange, A.J. Brown and Jalen Johnson just being like, good, good battle. Love that ish, all that stuff. And it's true. You can cover a guy perfectly, but if he's an elite receiver like A.J. Brown is, there's nothing you can do, especially when you've got a quarterback that is accurate, that is throwing these balls exactly where A.J. Brown can get them and no one else. The biggest thing about Tom Brady has always been that he throws good incompletions. I remember Todd Bowles telling me that he throws like some of the best incompletions you'll ever see because if his receiver can't get it, nobody else can. Yeah. And that's exactly what Jalen Hurts was doing. So I don't really take that to heart, not being able to contain A.J. Brown as much. But again, it was a good battle. And honestly, there was a couple of plays, especially with Jalen Johnson, that I saw. I even tweeted it. I was like, man, Jalen Johnson just bodied A.J. Brown because he won a few of those battles too. But the reality of the DB position, those DB positions, is that you're judged more, or your screw ups are a little bit louder. Than the good plays you make. You can make 61 good plays, and out of 63, and you give up 2 plays, and it's like that was a terrible game. And it's like, well, wasn't it? Yeah,
the breakups don't make the highlight shows. I do know, like sometimes when you're the only time, like in the fantasy football show, that they will show bad plays is like if you're saying, don't start A.J. Brown this week, which they never say. They would have to go out and find the plays. Like I almost want to do that. Like I almost want to do a segment this week where I'm like, sit A.J. Brown, where they have to go out and pull all of Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon's good plays this week and show them fighting off A.J. Brown. Be like, I'm still starting him, but I just wanted some positive. I just wanted the Bears defense to get a little bit of love. So I'm glad that we're able to clear the air on the Bears defense. And speaking of which, we spend 90% of our time indoors, and indoor air can be 5 times dirtier than the air outside. An AirPura air purifier can remove tobacco smoke, odors, VOCs, mold, wildfire smoke, chemicals, and viruses from your breathing air. Like I was out there today going out to my kids, their little Christmas pageant, which was amazing. So many coughing kids in masks, but that's why we went out there and got an air purifier. And right now, if you use the code SICK7, you get 7% off your purchase at www.airpura.com. Once again, that's www.airpura.com. Make sure you use the code SICK7. Time now to take a look at some of the questions we probably have rolling in. Now we're both positive. What's the landscape like out there, Sammy? Are we going to want to wade into this? Are we like worm food? If we get the Magic Unicorn trade for 2 slightly later top 10 picks, do we go defense and shore up the offensive line? Like obviously, a lot of this is going to be predicated what we do in free agency. But as it stands right now, if you had 2 picks in the top 10, which way would you be leaning, Carmen?
I mean, yeah, like you need help on both sides of the ball, right? And I think that there's, Peter Skoronski is going to be somewhere in that area as far as offensive tackles go. And the little Northwestern kid, I'm a sucker for obviously my Northwestern Wildcats. I would love to see him stay home and become a Bear and kind of shore up the offensive line. Although I've said before that I also think that given Ryan Pohl's background as an offensive lineman, I think that he probably has the most confidence in himself to evaluate offensive linemen and maybe therefore can like find some more diamonds in the rough like later on in later rounds. But yeah, I mean, it's just the possibilities I just feel like are so endless, and it makes me so excited for the Bears because you don't need a quarterback, and to have those high of picks and not need a quarterback it's just rare. Like that's not usually the case. And it just sets you up to come away with 2 like franchise altering players. Especially, if you get the unicorn trade where you have the number 2 pick and then you just trade down a couple spots and then are still able to grab a Jalen Carter, a Will Anderson. And then, could you get your offensive tackle of the future in a guy like Peter Skoronski? That would be great. But I mean, I think the strategy has to be like all these teams, all these staffs have like a big board and they have all these players that they absolutely love. And they just, start picking these guys. A lot of, I should say, not every staff operates like this, but a lot of them do, where best player available, they start picking guys off the board as they're taken, and then they take their top guy. And I think that that's probably how this staff operates, given who they picked, this past draft, and taking defensive backs when maybe that wasn't their biggest need. It definitely seems like they go best player available. And I think when you have as many needs as this Bears team does, that's probably the right way to approach it. So I don't know that I can really make any predictions as to like what's going to happen. It just is going to depend on who they really like and who is still there. And that's at the top of their board.
Yeah, it's an empty canvas. It's like walking into Portillo's and just seeing everything on the board is available to you. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to go cake shake and not even get a hot dog. You never know. There's a lot of different ways.
We have a Portillo sponsorship now? Come on.
No, we don't. Like it's also the same, like when I like living out here in Southern California, I don't get to Portillo's a lot, but usually I take the kids to Del Taco, and whenever I take the kids to Del Taco, I'm very limited because of what they'll eat. And so I got to order them a combo meal knowing I'm going to take their tacos and they're going to do this. So whenever I walk into a Del Taco by myself, like it is surprising to be like, I can order anything. Like I don't have to order the quesadilla meal because that's all my daughter wants to eat. And then I know that they're going to get extra fry or whatever. I'm like, I can just order whatever I want. And it's an amazing situation. So I think that's the way it's going to be for Ryan Poles. And you know what? Like crazy things, who knows what can happen if they end up with that number, especially if they end up with number 1. And then the ability to move down the board and acquire more picks. And, you think about the way that the NFL's worked out this season. When you think of the prime players who've contributed on NFL rosters this year. And I know everybody's going to be like, when are we going to draft offense or a wide receiver? I know that'll be a big one. But when we see guys like George Pickens and Christian Watson, who've played pretty well this season, not every receiver that was drafted in the first round has turned into a superstar. Now, Garrett Wilson's good. Drake London hasn't really gotten an opportunity, and Chris Olave's looked good. But there were some other guys taken in the first round that, as you look back at it now, you're like, oh, I forgot that player was drafted ahead of Christian Watson. So it's important not to fall in love with a position and feel like you have to take a guy. Like, we have to do this. We have to do that. Because the good thing about, like, not the good thing, but outside of quarterback, everything is in play. And if we trade down and by some miracle, some of these players start falling and you're like, okay, like if you end up with a Micah Parsons type player, because remember, he was drafted 11th overall. Like he wasn't like the first overall pick in the draft, although you would think so, the way he's been productive. Man, there are so many great values, and I trust Ryan Poles too. People ask me, they're like, why do you have so much trust in him? Like, why? I'm like, I don't know, because Kyler Gordon's been playing very well. Jaquan Brisker has been a stud. Jack Sanborn, who is an undrafted guy, has played very well. Braxton Jones is good. Moving Tevin.
Dominic Robinson, like you've got
Robinson, you know what? And I'm like, and a lot of these guys, like, you get so spoiled that, you know, if they don't come out and score 4 touchdowns like Christian Watson did up until last night, you're like, well, that guy's not playing well. You're like, well, that's not the whole story. And it's not feasible for every player to come in and make a huge impact during their rookie year. Like, everybody's gotten so spoiled with some of these players who've played so well as rookies that it's like, it's not always like that. Sometimes it can be a slow burn. And so
I feel like it's position dependent too. I mean, some positions take a little bit longer to develop because the position in college is different from that in the league. I think we see that a lot with offensive linemen. I think we see that a lot with tight ends, especially too, which doesn't get a lot of conversation, I don't think. Just how different the tight end position is in college versus what they're expected to do at the NFL level. So I think that all that has to be taken into consideration too. And I don't know that I want to say like positional value is necessarily like a myth, but there are varying, like every position is going to end up being important, whether or not they make an impact in their first year. I feel like that's where like positions kind of come into play more than anything. But I feel like, especially like you said, with the Bears having pretty much everything in play, every single pick is going to be important, and how many picks you have. And I feel like Ryan Poles has hit on a lot of picks in just his first draft, which will aid in the confidence I think that everybody has in him. And the fact, not only that, but like what you've done post draft in like Tevin Jenkins, putting him at right guard, like little, and again, like moving players around in different areas, having Jack Sanborn come up, all that kind of stuff. That's all personnel decision too. So I think, or personnel has a role to play in those decisions, I should say. I have total faith in him.
Yeah, I do too. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun offseason. And of course, Matt Eberflus was talking about the 3 technique. I believe it was today, talking about it quite glowingly. So that'll probably be something that's going to be addressed, although I would imagine they bring in a veteran to fill that spot. All right, Sammy, how about another question, if we could? Do you think the Bears re-sign Montgomery, or does Poles follow the Chiefs' example and not pay running backs? I'm going to field this one first, Carmen, because we were talking about it Sunday at Rip Beer Company. And again, we had another nice crowd come out, which has been amazing considering the Bears, you know, not playing for the playoffs currently, but we still got a nice crowd out there because everybody loves to watch Justin Field and watch the development. We were talking about David Montgomery. I honestly believe, and I'm a little bit biased, I love David and I want him to stay. But when you look at the number of free agents who will be available this season at the running back position, I think that's going to depress the price a little bit. And I think that, you know, when it comes to familiarity and chemistry and everything like that, instead of trying to chase the Bucs with Josh Jacobs or Saquon Barkley or some of these other guys that the Bears have been, well, mostly it's kids on the internet being like, yeah, I heard the Bears are going, like, I don't know how much I buy that. I think there's a good chance, and this is just my conjecture, there is a good chance that David Montgomery returns to this team. What are you hearing out there in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, they obviously really love what he brings to this offense, and the fact that you can have such a solid run game. I mean, they've designated Khalil Herbert to return from IR now as well. And I think like when this run game is clicking on all cylinders, all the guys are healthy. I think they all play a really good role. And that starts with David Montgomery. And I mean, again, like his effort in this last game against the Eagles, again, you know, these guys don't have a postseason to play for at this point. David Montgomery especially doesn't really have anything to prove or play for right now. And the effort and just the sheer like will and leadership that he brings to that offense is irreplaceable. And I think that they lean on him a lot. And I don't think that Justin Fields gets to be as much of Justin Fields if David Montgomery isn't there as well. And I think that only magnifies when you have Khalil Herbert, because now you've got a really good backfield tandem plus a quarterback like Justin Fields who can beat you with his legs. And I mean, you look at the Eagles, like they're another run first kind of team. And given the fact that they have a third option in Jalen Hurts, it's worked out pretty well for them. And I think that, especially if you get some more help with the offensive line, although this offensive line, I will say, for as much flack as they've been catching, in pass blocking and especially true pass sets, I was reading some stuff off of PFF the other day, their run blocking grades have been great. And they've been able to open up this run game for the Bears that has tied them over this season. So David Montgomery has to be encouraged by that as a running back. And again, like the familiarity and the comfortability being here in Chicago. But I mean, you never really know, because as a running back too, I feel like your careers are already short. It's one they have that position group has one of the shortest careers on average of any position group. You probably do want to get money while you can. And if Poles does it, and I would think that, Poles' inclination, just like our friend said about the Chiefs, like, they don't really pay running backs.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think that that's going to change. Especially when you do have a running option under center. As much as I would love David Montgomery to say, I don't think that I could fault him for taking a larger contract somewhere else. Yeah. Especially when running back careers are so short.
Yeah, I just don't know where that opportunity lends itself with so many guys who are going to be available out there, and the lack of money available for the running back position is league wide. It's not just a Bears thing. I don't think anybody's going out there and spending a ton of money on the running back position. Look at a couple of years ago when Le'Veon Bell was coming off some of his best seasons, when he was truly considered, probably the best running back in the game at the time. And he just bounced around. Like, we were like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay that much money. So hopefully that a deal can be worked out with the Chicago Bears. I don't expect it to be a record breaker or anything like that. But I think that, and again, I don't know what David Montgomery is thinking, and I don't know if the number comes in where it works out for both teams and it makes sense, because obviously they can go out there and draft another guy. But as we've seen with Tristan Ebner, it's not always a guarantee that the guy that you draft is going to be as effective as the guy who was already there. So hopefully if Ebner was playing really well, I would feel very concerned about this. I would be like, we could be in some trouble. But at the same time, he's not, like, he's been fine. But, they're bringing in Darrington Evans and guys like that to spell some people. And I think that hopefully, I think it works out. I hope it works out. I think David Montgomery is a really good running back. I think and obviously I know Josh Jacobs is putting up better numbers this year, like fantasy wise. I think David Montgomery as a pure runner is better. And that's me. And I'll die on that hill. How about another question, though? Do you guys believe that the Bears need a center? They can sign Lucas Patrick. They signed Lucas Patrick, who is injured. Do guys lose their jobs because of injury? I will say this. Lucas Patrick is somebody who would give the Bears depth on the offensive line, but I don't think that you can rule out drafting a center because Lucas Patrick is there. What is your feeling, Carmen?
Yeah, and I mean, to answer that last question, do guys kind of get released or not re-signed because of injury? Yeah, absolutely. Like, the best ability still remains availability, and it's such a coach colloquialism or whatever you want to call it, but it's true, and that's the hard truth of this. And we also, I mean, Lucas Patrick had a great season for Green Bay before he came to Chicago. He was also snapping to a very experienced, elite, one of the best quarterbacks this league has ever seen. That inherently takes a lot of responsibility and pressure off of the center, is when you have a guy back there that can already recognize all the checks, can recognize the defenses, the down linemen, all that kind of stuff. There's nothing Aaron Rodgers hasn't seen. And that makes life really easy for a center. Whereas when you are working with a younger quarterback who, talented as Justin Fields is, not as experienced as a guy like Aaron Rodgers. That's not controversial to say. And so you want someone that's a little bit more experienced, I feel like, up front, to be able to identify things and make things easier for Justin and make his development kind of come along a little bit. The center to quarterback relationship is one of the things that has fascinated me the most And every time that like I've studied offensive line, and that's kind of what it was born out of, is just that whole relationship and how much pressure is on that exchange. Because I mean, yes, the quarterback touches the ball every snap of the offensive snap of the game, but so does the center.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of responsibility on the center that I feel like a lot of people don't realize. So if I do think they need a center, and I would tend to think that they would go for a veteran, again, just to give more experience and to make things a little bit easier on Justin, him not having to do everything and identify everything and make all of the checks and calls and everything like that. I mean, and that's, again, like, I think that also plays into why the relationship maybe hasn't worked as well with Sam Mustipher as you would have liked. He hasn't graded out really great. I tend to think that he's better than a lot of people give him credit for, but at the same time, he's not experienced. And so he's not really providing any of that kind of value as far as what, more experienced centers who have seen everything can do. So I would love to see the Bears go out and get, a pretty, like a really good veteran center who has maybe 3, 4, 5 years under his belt. Because wildly enough, centers can have really long careers.
Yeah.
Despite that being on the line. I mean, we're seeing these guys like go longer and longer all along the line, but
for sure.
That interior spot. I mean, it's all the stuff that they're responsible for. I would love to see the Bears get a more experienced guy.
100%. I don't think that you can rule out anybody, even the fact, and again, Lucas Patrick, and I know they promised him, or it was discussed that he was going to play center for the Chicago Bears, but if things work out that he's got to be kicked to the guard position, then I think that's just what's going to happen. I think they're just going to figure out the best combination moving forward. And hopefully next year there will be a lot of consistency on the offensive line, and we won't have to, because that's the one thing too, is like, if Lucas Patrick doesn't get hurt in training camp, who knows how this unfolds? Who knows how that relationship develops? So there was a lot of things, but again, you can't just be like, well, we promised this to you last year. Cause like, if you think about it, like the Packers have been going through this thing with David Bakhtiari, is that like, it's been fascinating, like how long that the injuries have kept him out, and he's never been able to come back. And it's disappointing to see. And it just shows you like, you can't really count on anything. Like and you hate to see it on a human level, as we've talked about earlier, but like, man, it's been such a bummer. So again, I don't think that anybody, like nobody's earned a spot of like, well, we'll save this open for you. Everybody's going to be out there competing for their job next season. How about another question there, Sammy? Yeah.
Thanks, Charlie.
It is all Christmased out, especially with the fire.
Yeah, it makes me really happy. I don't know. As soon as I was traveling most of November, but and I was traveling a lot of December, but I had this stretch at the beginning of December where I was like, I'm gonna go all out. And like literally when I was on the trip before I got home in December, I was like ordering all these packages to be like waiting for me when I got home, and it was my Christmas tree, and it just makes me happy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it up till like February probably.
Do what you do. You know what's funny is I've always, like, when people complain about Christmas decorations or Christmas music and all that stuff, I'm like, you know what? Like, I think people have had it pretty tough over the last couple of years. If Christmas makes you happy, go do it. Decorate, do whatever, have fun. Like, you don't have to answer to anybody. I think it looks great, Carmen, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Christmas is pretty awesome, and everybody should enjoy it. How about one final? That could have been the last one, but I knew Casey. No, we're not. I don't think that I don't think that he has a problem. I just think that he's a player who's adjusting to the NFL. And again, it's been fun watching guys like Christian Watson go out there and play pretty well, and some of these young wide receivers go out there and make an immediate impact. But you know what? Unfortunately, it hasn't been there for Velus Jones. And so, I still have confidence in him. I'm not giving up on him after 12, 14 games, whatever it's been. I think it's going to be a work in progress for him. He battled some injuries during the offseason, which kind of slowed his development. But at some point, he's going to have to go out there and put up numbers and put up production. And that's one of the things. And again, even though he was a third-round pick, this team's gone out and they've traded for a second-round pick with Chase Claypool. They brought it in N'Keal Harry. They're going to keep adding pieces. They're probably going to draft a guy this year. There might be a big-name free agent. We can wish cast somebody like DeAndre Hopkins or Mike Evans or something like that. It is going to get tougher and tougher.
Don't tease me with Mike Evans coming.
Whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, Mike Evans, maybe DeAndre Hopkins, though, kind of could make some sense if they blow everything up. Whatever. It's going to continue to get difficult, and it's going to take he's going to have to rise to the occasion. And I'm a big Velus fan, and everybody knows this. And you know what? He's going to have to play better. He knows it as well as anybody. I don't think that there's anybody who's he knows he wants to go out there. He wants to compete. He wants to play well. And so that's it. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Was there a good one, Sammy? I knew I should have left on the Christmas one. Now he's scouring. He can't find anything. I will go back. What free agent defensive lineman do you think the Bears will target? I hope there'll probably be, again, it's kind of hard to look at the situation, what's going on in the league, who's going to be making moves. But looking back at Indianapolis, I feel like they're going to have to do something. They're almost on the verge of blowing everything up in and of themselves. I start looking at them and be like, who could we poach from there? I think that's going to be a place to start. And again, until we start seeing who's making moves and things like that, it's really hard to predict at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at like who's due to be a free agent, but we've seen so many times that doesn't necessarily mean anything. You've got trades and exactly like which team is going to be selling in free agency or come the off season and trying to offload some big contracts. But again, like you're going to need to look at guys that probably fit the system. If you're going with a veteran, you need to find a guy that kind of fits the system inherently, that 4-3 defense, that 3 tech. So much plays off of that position. So and I think somebody said it before, would love to see a veteran in that spot, or you said that before.
I said that,
in that 3 tech, in that 3 tech spot. Again, much for the same reasons that I was saying that I would like a veteran center for a very crucial part of this defense that is so young to begin with. I would love a veteran 3 tech as well. And then, also, I mean, if Jalen Carter's there when you're drafting.
Yeah. Oh, what are we going to do? I mean, it is one of those things.
But yeah, I like the seeing if there's going to be a Colts fire sale and being like, you played for Matt Eberflus, didn't you? Come on over. Or you heard about Matt Eberflus, like Yannick Ngakoue. Well, come on.
Ngakoue, I made the mistake. They have not. They weren't there in Indianapolis at the same time. But that's why I was saying you've heard about Matt. You've heard of him. I'm sure the players have talked him up. Well, it's insane because Chase Daniel, who I now have a relationship with, loves Matt Eberflus. That's who recruited him to go play at Missouri all the way back in the day when he was the defensive coordinator for the Tigers. And so he loves Matt Eberflus. D'Angelo Hall, who I didn't really get the connection. He was here last night too at the NFL Network. He loves Matt Eberflus. So the word around the NFL is that players love Matt Eberflus. And even though we can sit here and I know, Brian Daboll was this guy that we watched in Buffalo and we're like, we hope we get Daboll and everything. And he's done a great job with the New York Giants. Make no mistake about it. The Bears hiring of Matt Eberflus is probably going to go down as one of those sneaky good hires because everybody in the league really loves him and respects him. And so I expect this free agent class or anybody who becomes available is going to be thinking about going to Chicago because number one, they want to play with Justin Fields. And number two, they like the coach and the coaching staff. And I think they've got a lot of money. And they got money, which is the most important
money
thing.
Talks.
Money does talk. And, but yeah, so we'll see it. There's a lot of interesting things, a lot of cool things going on with the Chicago Bears. So there's so much to look forward to. In addition to looking forward to things, I will again be on with Jeff Joniak, Tom Thayer this week on the Bears radio show. So I've been confirming that as we've been here. I'm like, Jeff, I'm doing a show. I don't want you doing business when I'm on your show, sir. But no, we got that settled. So I'll be on with them this week. Carmen, where are you going to be this weekend? What are you doing?
I'm going to be with the Bears again. So I will be at Bears Bills on Christmas Eve, and we'll be hurrying back to my family's house right after the game to go have the Feast of the Seven Fishes dinner, which is a big tradition in my family. So
yeah, the Italian tradition. I've been hearing all about it. I've now got to figure out a way to get invited to a supper like that, but it sounds amazing.
If you're going to be in Chicago, you're welcome to come to the Vitali house.
I would love that. At some point, I'll have to make that stop at some point. But I want to thank everybody who is here with us tonight. Thank you so much for asking these questions. Thanks for listening to us. Again, it's great because being 3-11 and being able to be this positive is so huge for us. And I think that it's only going to get better. It's going to get more exciting as the season continues to move on, as we get into the off season. I feel like people are now like disinterested, and then they'll be back around in January. And of course, after the playoffs, once that hot stove, whatever the NFL equivalent of the hot stove is. But thanks so much for being here, Carmen. Really appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks for having me as always.
All right, there it goes. Thanks.
Happy holidays.
Sammy. Happy holidays. Oh yeah, this will be it before we see you for the holidays. So happy holidays. That's all we got. Thank you so much, Sammy. Go ahead and play us out and bear down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy and AirPura.